Welcome back to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we try to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges that keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Carl Ormans, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into a topic that many sales leaders have had to walk through, many marketers have had to walk through. It's achievement and then scale. Your number is going to grow next year. What are the things to be aware of? Today's podcast is sponsored by Virtual Causeway. Virtual Causeway is a B2B go-to-market partner who helps you generate more qualified leads, speeds up your sales cycle, and grows your revenue, all without adding headcount. Learn more about them at virtualcauseway.com and mention the show for a special rate. So before we jump in, here's why the conversation matters. Imagine implementing just one strategy from today's discussion and watching your revenue shift within weeks, not months. That's exactly what the goal of the podcast is. Let's talk about the revenue challenges that other leaders have faced and how do they solve it. As I like to say, success leaves clues, and we're going to highlight those clues for you. So my guest today began his working experience, I should say, as a chef for 4 years before he moved into sales. He's worked at companies like Enterprise as a branch manager. He then went on to Cintas as a sales manager and a director of sales. He's a member of the Forbes Business Council. He's the author of Six-Figure Sales Secrets, and he was the top sales influencer for Salesforce for 4 straight years. Today, he's the founder and CEO of Venly. Welcome to the podcast, Marcus Chan, and thank you very much for being with us.
What's up, Carl? Pumped to be here.
Yeah, us too. So before we jump in and dive into all of revenue challenges, can you give the world a little bit of context of what is your world? So what industries, what verticals do you work in today? What size companies? What are your selling motions? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So now typically you work with, more mid-market enterprise organizations. They're usually doing at least 50 million plus per year in sales, if not more. Usually their orgs are at least 25 to 30 plus AEs, the very, very minimum. So there's multiple layers of leadership. So a lot of times, and by the way, in terms of verticals, a lot of SaaS for sure, to a lot of actually some really interesting industry. Basically, almost any industry that does B2B sales, we've actually have worked with, from industrial companies to like telecommunications to business supplies, waste services, etc. So ultimately, if they have a direct frontline sales force, that's like working with prospects, whether it's on Zoom or in the field, and there's multiple layers of leadership. Oftentimes there's broken parts of their process that we help go and help fix and systemize across the board, whether it's working directly with the reps, enablement, their leadership team, and a lot more. So we work across the board for all types of organizations. So it's a lot of fun what I get to do, because ultimately I'm a problem solver. That's what it is. So we're coming in, we're figuring out what the core problems are, and we're helping systematically solve it. So not putting band-aids on, one part of the problem, but actually looking at what's a core root issue and solving that so systematically it can scale and grow beyond that core issue.
That's awesome. It reminds me of taking when I was working in manufacturing, and I don't know how much you know about the Kaizen and going to Gemba, if you've had any of that, but it's like, let's go and find the root of the problem. What is the root? And let's address the root, because it's if you can't fix the root, then the rest of it's going to fester. So very cool. So Marcus and I admittedly we don't really have much relationship other than on LinkedIn. Like he's been liking some posts. We've had a little bit of interaction. And I was like, hey, do you want to come on? Like, I feel like you'd be a great topic. And he said yes, and very kindly. So when we were prepping for this, I said, hey, Marcus, what's a successful revenue initiative you've led or an existing challenge you're solving? And you were pretty easily to say, well, it's got to be the challenge of, I hit my number, I achieved it, but then next year my number just doubled. And there's successes that come with it. Now, not only do I have to repeat great success, but I also have to grow that number. Mm-hmm. So I'll just maybe start with this one. How come you chose this as the topic to talk through today?
Well, so I think for a couple different reasons. Number one, the reality is as we all know in sales, we're only as good as the number we delivered yesterday. Mm-hmm. And every year the clock restarts, or for some people every quarter restarts. So, the curse of being great in what you do, especially as a leader or as an individual salesperson, is you get the curse of a bigger number the following year. That's just what happens. And reality is anybody can hit President's Club one time. Anybody can have a one banner year. but very small percentile can have repeat success year after year after year, especially at scale the sales organization. That's why it's really not uncommon for many sales VPs and CROs to last maybe 18, 24 months until they're either pushed out, forced out, or they find themselves exiting out to go after something else instead, and then repeating that cycle. But if you can identify and solve core challenges for repeatable success, you start to realize how can you stack your numbers every single year, win every single year like clockwork. Doesn't mean it's easy, but at least you have a playbook to run. So when you ask me that question, I'm like, well, to me, it seems that the obvious answer is we should go for the challenge, because reality is you have a banner year, now what? And then the year after that, now what? And it's a constant game. You're constantly going until you build enough, escape velocity to go do your own thing.
So this is obviously an issue you've faced personally, or it's one you're constantly seeing with some of your clients.
Both.
So both. Okay. So maybe if we take that perspective here. So how did that happen for you? You hit, let's just say you hit your number, whatever number is, I'll just say round number. I hit $5 million is my number. That was it. And all of a sudden next year, you say, hey, Marcus, your number's now 7.5. How did you prepare for that? Because it's not just, well, we're going to up the quotas for our team. There's a lot of things that need to go into that: hiring, training, onboarding, enablement, territory planning, etc. And I could probably go on for more and more. But how did you approach breaking that down from a systematic perspective for success?
Yeah, great question. So I'm gonna give you a couple different examples, right? So I'll just tell a story. I think it helped illustrate really, really well. So this is my second year as a director. So I just had my first year as a director. I had a sales org of about 85 plus employees. We were underperforming. We turned it around. It hit my number. We did great. Blew the number out. Ended up doing over 150 million a year new business that year. The next year, I got the gift of not just a year-over-year increase over my prior target. It was a year-over-year increase over what I finished at. So it was almost double-digit increase over what I had trended at anyways, right? So that was the gift I was given. So obviously, I'm very, very stressed. Now, on top of that, there was other things that were really stressing me out as well. For instance, number one, the company just acquired another billion-dollar company. So there was this acquisition that was happening at the same time. It was a competitor, so they were culturally different. Their team sold purely off price, like half the price, right? I absorbed into my market about 15 to 20 plus reps, right? And then it was very clear. There's no layoffs. We had to save and keep every single person while maintaining everyone else on our team. We had to ramp and integrate them. And on top of that, because we had the same territory, my market territory did not change. So now I had more reps in the same territory, which meant everyone's territory shrank. So you can imagine the turmoil now with every rep who's like, wait, hold on. Not only do I get less accounts this year, I now need to sell with these people I should sell against. They're going to be in the bullpen with me. They're going to be part of our team, and we need to kind of bring them in. So there's a lot of repercussions of that. And then on top of that, like I started having all this personal stuff, right? Like my parents, who have been married at the point like 37 years, were fighting, talking about divorce, right? I was getting stressed with that. I was traveling a lot. My son was 6 months old at the time, right? So I had all these things that was going on. But ultimately, when you boil it down, I still had one core objective, which is I need to deliver my number, right? At the end of the day, despite all this stuff going on, I had to deliver my number, right? So the first thing I did was, number one, I took a look at the whole situation. I needed to identify, okay, what are the constraints in my organization, and are we set up for success? What does success look like 12 months out? And what do I anticipate to be the biggest challenges? So there was some unique things in there where I had to take a look. I'm like, okay, well, number one, I knew culturally, I need to make sure these new hires adapted quickly in, right? If I do it right, I can add an extra head. I can do an extra 500K per head per person for each of those people. So I knew strategically, if I can keep those people, get them delivered at least 500K each, that would drive additional revenue, obviously, as a result, right? Obviously, they do better, they'll do even more, right? So I had to take a look at the whole situation and kind of neutralize it. So the first step was I'm out literally traveling to every market, meeting each person, sitting there, make sure they feel very, very welcome, And whenever I have a new hire, I always sit down and do what's called a success blueprint. I walk through what their goals are, what they want to achieve in life, what they struggle with, etc., what their weaknesses are, and I build an action plan with them. So I sat down every single one, made sure they felt very, very welcome. It was a big part, right? And that was part of the strategy. On top of that, because this is my second year in the role, I had already put a lot of key sales leaders in place. And I also had trained them on how to onboard, train, develop people. So we put together our own onboarding playbook, a 98 playbook, right? Because what we found was I knew as a company whole, that's why you got to know your numbers, and beyond just like revenue. I knew by the time the average person, when we opened a job requisition, the average like rep would take 157 days to get to their first deal, from open requisition to getting hired into closing the first deal. That was too long. That was far too long. So I knew how to compress that timeline, right? So that's why even beforehand, I'd already put things in place, such as making sure my managers knew how to train one-on-one and do all the core things like a world-class President's Club level sales leader. That was very, very critical because this is how I leveraged through myself into them, right? So that was already in place because of my year one. I identified as a core obstacle, right? The second thing I realized before as well was we weren't developing future leaders. So I actually had rebuilt our leadership development program for our top performing AEs. So this is a developmental program I implemented in the first 12 months that developed the leaders or developed those top performing AEs to become either a great IC down the road for larger opportunities or into sales leadership. So I built a whole curriculum. We had implemented all that stuff as part of my first 12 months. And then that was also naturally leading down to year two. I have more locker room leaders and I have more of these future leaders on these teams. So if you take a step back, I'm making sure I'm meeting all the new hires, making sure they're completely dialed. I knew my leaders are already dialed already because I trained them properly, put them into place, gave them an onboarding plan for the new hires that they're going to be running, in which I had complete oversight on. I'd also put in locker room leaders that are getting developed as well as part of their program. This helped me make sure things are stable at every single operation. So these are the key things as part of that process, right? So like for me, that was like a really, really big piece, right? And then what I did now as a leader is, because we already had a lot of processes in place how we manage the number, because all my leaders knew how to train, they knew how to hire, they knew how to develop, they knew how to do one-on-ones, they knew how to do call reviews, they knew how to coach because I trained them all leaders. And now also my locker room leaders, same thing. So I'm deploying resources. I'm making people better across the board to make it far easier my year two. So yes, we had all this stuff happening and going on. So now I knew I can make sure I could set the vision. I can go into each of these markets, meet all the people, keep very close to them, develop them, but also run the systems we've already put into place that I'm already doing to lead the leaders, right? And that's like, obviously knowing our numbers tight, having like really good directives on how I manage the team, having quarterly initiatives, driving all those things. So because we did all those things, like we're able to keep our turnover relatively low. We kept it we actually increased turnover a little bit because we still had some turnover. So I think I initially took it from 50% down to 17% in year one as a whole org. And then we increased like 22% that second year. So we had a little bit of attrition, it is what it is. But we still maintained pretty low turnover, right? And then through that though, we end up, we actually had an amazing banner year, blew our number out. We set in like a record number of people to President's Club. I think we like that size market, most people say maybe 5 to 6. We sent, I think, 28 people that year to President's Club, right? Broke a lot of records. So, but it's because we have these systems in place, right? So if we take a step back, I'll say sure about what happened in year one, but in year two, there was things that I did that was consistent. So I made sure people were very engaged, right? I made sure I reached out to each person. It was consistent with it. I made sure they were properly trained and developed. I made sure we had ongoing training for them. I made sure they felt surrounded and supported by their locker room leaders, to their leaders. I made sure I helped manage those processes. And then I was also visible. I came in and I hung out with the teams and each of the reps every single quarter. So there was a high level of visibility, and I'm very in touch with the team to drive the performance. Was it perfect? No. There's a bunch of stuff go wrong? 100%, right? But we can at least stabilize the core processes and have the right SOPs, standard operating procedures for success. It's far easier to scale as a result.
So you said a lot there, and if anybody's paying, like whoever's listening to this, go back. I think it's about 10 minutes and just listen to everything that you just said. And because here's what I heard. You went through the hiring process. So how did I hire? How do I and then you went to the enablement side, the onboarding. How do I onboard somebody? how do I get them into the seat to reduce my time to first deal?
Mhm.
And then how do I make sure that my leaders are able to do all of those things
Correct.
while I'm able to do all the rest of the job, but make sure that I've got my standard. So these are all major things inside of a company.
Yeah.
I've got lots of questions for you on this, but here's the
Mhm.
first one. Who helped you try to get everything done and implement all of these processes?
Yeah. So first off, it doesn't happen overnight, right? So I wish I could say someone taught me these things and coached me on these things. No. But what I have realized is in every single role that you're in, the Pareto principle always applies, which is 20% of what you do drives 80% of the results. So, so the important concept to understand here is in each of the roles that you're in, what is the 20% that drives the results, right? Like if you think about it, for example, to make it very simple, for reps, they have I call IPAs, income producing activities. And to me, they only do four things. Number one, they generate pipeline, advance pipeline, close pipeline, advance their sales skills. That's the four biggest things that will drive revenue and close business for them. Everything else is just noise. All right. So that means if I'm training a rep, I'm focusing on that. Now, here's the thing. Let's say you're a frontline sales leader. Now it's different. Okay. You can't do the same thing. It's because you obviously have a team now, right? So forget the title, because sometimes they're called VP, sometimes they're called salesman, some of the directors. When you have a direct frontline sales force of AEs report into you, I broke it down to what I call charge. Okay. And charge, what breaks down to, these are the 6 core levers for sales leadership. Number one, you got to coach for impact, right? So you got to make sure you develop them properly. You got to hire for excellence. So you got to bring in coachable, high potential talent. You need align the expectations. So they have to be really clear. What are expectations from activity to outcomes? They need run the pipeline. So drive hygiene, qualification, movement. They need to grade performance, right? Which is identify the gaps early and fix things fast. And then they need to engineer high performance culture. So they're really modeling, embedding behaviors that win. So you understand as a frontline sales leader, you're doing these things, right? Now, if you're going to, for example, my title is deceiving. I was called the sales director, but we delivered 9 figures a year. I mean, I actually had full P&L responsibility. So, my full org was about 110 employees within my org, but I was dotted line to hundreds of other employees on the business side that impacted the other half of my comp plan. So I was responsible for bottom line impact, right?
Mm.
So at that level of responsibility, the 20% I call scale, right? And it stands for something, which is number one, I got to shape the org. Okay. So it's a structure, the territories, the roles for clarity and coverage. I need to coach the leaders. Okay. I need to up level the managers into world-class coaches, because this is how you extend yourself, right? I need to align the revenue motion. So I need to look at the go-to-market, the product, the enablement. I need to unify it towards growth. I need to leverage the data. So I need to operationalize the insights for forecasting and performance. And need to enable skill. I need to build systems, playbooks, and rhythms for replicate success. So when I identify these things, when you kind of understand these frameworks of scale and charge, I start building them based off the highest priority that will drive the greatest long-term results. So for instance, if you listen closely to the first 12 months, I didn't just go out and just try to ride with the reps and just sell deals individually, because I knew that only changed the results right there. I saw the core challenge, which was, well, the leaders do not know how to be a world-class leader. Like everything that I was doing, they hadn't done. I had President's Club every single year as a frontline sales leader. Well, there were things that I did, right? And they weren't doing these things. And if they were doing, they weren't doing it well. So they either didn't know the what, or they didn't know the how, or they didn't know both. So I built a playbook, teaching and coaching and training them to make sure they ran the playbook I ran. That was like really key. So that was a major focus. But what I also saw, because I forecasted ahead, I'm like, what happens if I can't coach them to get better? Well, if there's a bad fit for the role, I need to replace them, right? Who are my backfills? Well, an external backfill is far harder than an internal backfill.
Mhm.
And your best rep is not always your best leader. And they kind of had a development program in place, but it was really garbage. It was like read a book once a month type of thing. Like that's useless.
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, what are the core skills I need a sales leader to have? And it's those things within charge, right? Most of them didn't know how to do those things. So if you get really tactical, for instance, most of them didn't know how to read a P&L, profit and loss statement. Like most sales leaders don't even know how to read a P&L, but
Mm.
that determines what you need to do, right? So when you understand cash flow and P&L and these operating models, you can run a better business. So I made sure when I was developing these reps in this program's curriculum, it was developing them to actually do the skills I need them to do. That was very, very vital. So as I started to build these things out, like, you have to be really smart about deploying resources, right? So it's kind of like, okay, cool. Like first off, like who can help me with this, right? So depending on whatever initiatives I'm focused on, like who can help me? Do I have anyone who's already excelling these things? Can they help me with building this out? Is it more administrative? Do I just need to get my EA to do it, right? Did I have an EA? So I actually didn't have an EA to begin with. So executive assistant for those who don't know what that is. So I had to make sure, like, one of my first things that I realized, I'm like, I need to get an EA. So I hired an EA to basically get rid of any low-level tasks that could free my mind. So it's kind of like if you give tasks a dollar amount, right? For what's worth, is that task a $30 an hour task? Is it a $100 an hour task, or is it a $2,000 an hour task, or $5,000 an hour task? When you identify those core tasks, you can take a look at the ones who are low level and you replace them with staff automation or AI or something like that, right? At the time, because I only have so much control, I can only do hiring. So I'm like, no problem. I'll hire staff to replace those pieces to help deploy those type of resources, right? So that's why it's really critical for when we're building these things out. That's what I'm focused on doing. It's like, hey, what can I go do, right? And then, of course, either I deploy someone else to do it for me. If they couldn't do it, I had to figure out how to do it myself, which is something that's just a challenge of it. You just got to figure out how to do it, and then you make it happen. But the key is identify the core resources. What are you missing? Fill in the gaps and find a way to get it done. Especially if it's a high key priority, you're probably not going to see any results right now, but you'll see it down the road. So to give you an example, so now I left that organization almost 7 years ago, right? To this day, that director in that market has still been like the number one director in the company.
Wow.
Ever since, right? My backfills, who were my former sales managers. So we had two different backfills, both of them my former sales managers. They're still the top. So it's like I see all the presents. It's all my people, right? And the reason is not because I'm special by any means. That's not my point. My point is more so is I understand the power of scale and systems. I'm putting the right things in place that are scalable and that live beyond just you. That's why even after I left to start my own business, they actually took my EA because we built all the systems for my market and they deployed it for the whole region. Wow. Because they wanted to deploy these in a better way. And she was my rock. I trained her and showed her, and we built these together because she was such an awesome hire.
Yeah, something you said there, simple scales and that's what I take away from. I have this saying, simple scales, right? So you have charge and you have scale. So you have two different acronyms, which I'm such a big fan of with the acronym side of things. It sounds like you were inside of a big company at the time, so we don't have to say the company name. But when you were doing all of these changes, what kind of feedback or pushback did you get from others inside the company for you to deploy and roll all this out?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Some of them thought it was kind of crazy, right? To be quite frank. They're like, oh, just use what the company gives you, right? Like, hey, there's a reason we're a big company. You just kind of do what it does. Well, here's the reality. If it worked for every single region and market, they all be crushing it. So it's like, those are a good baseline as an idea, but it's like, I've always thought about it it's like this. It's like when you have a recipe, it can be hit or miss, but how can you make it your own? Now, I'm very entrepreneurial in mindset. I'm a builder. I like to create and build things. That's just how it is, right? Like even when I was working at Enterprise years ago, it was a startup division of the big company. So there was nothing. There was no playbook. So I built everything from scratch from there. So I've always had the mindset of okay, what can I make? How can I make it better, right? Like if it's not already, first of all, if it already has something in place, how can I make it better? Now, I didn't go and start telling everyone about these things. So the mistake some people make is they start building these things and they're like, hey, look, everyone, look at what I'm doing. But they don't have any backing. They don't have any results to prove out their ideas and their theories. Everyone's got great ideas and theories, but very few come to fruition. So I didn't go and just tell people about it, right? But if someone said, oh, hey, I heard you built a really interesting developmental program for your top reps. Can we hop on a call and talk about it? And I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's talk about it. I show them the whole structure, the curriculum, the responsibilities, and how it's designed. And they'll be like, this is insane. Because it was enablement didn't do anything, right? They gave us a very basic product fact sheets and all that dumb stuff, right? We're in the people, but when you're running a sales org, you're in the people business. You're in human capital management. So how can we deploy human capital to generate the greatest possible result? right? Not in a transactional way, but like reality is when you make your team amazing, they're happier. Like they're happy because they're getting great results and their lives will be changed, right? So I understood that. So some of them would see these things that built out and be like, that seems like a lot of work. I'm like, it is a lot of work. It is absolutely a lot of work. But like we're seeing the fruits of the labor now. So for instance, like, like when I first built out like, the developmental program, it was a lot of work in year one to build out. And we didn't see any, like, it wasn't like amazing results because of it, right? Like, I mean, we probably saw some indirect ones, like, we had lower turnover. So because people felt developed, like, which is great. We had future career paths. So I think those are some of these intangibles, but I didn't really see the benefits till probably the second, third, and fourth year, because at that point we keep adding people in and qualifying people out of those programs. So I had a bench of people to recruit from, to put into leadership roles. So that was really key. I mean, reality is like, when you look at a sales organization, it's like, if I looked at my sales org, I knew with my reps, I had approximately 20% turnover. Let's call it a round number. So that meant 100 reps, 20 will leave, right? Whether it's through a termination, attrition, or something happened, they just don't like sales anymore. Minimum 20 will leave. That means I need to hire at least 20 people minimum, right? So you can have at least 20 new people in every single year. You already knew that, right? Your sales leaders might run that same number. So if you know this math, you have 10 sales leaders, that means 2 are you going to be gone every single year. You need to have a constant flow of people that are literally joining the ranks. You need to have a machine that keeps running. And you have to be thinking like not just right now, you need to be thinking like 5 years ahead. So you can adjust for headcount accordingly and staff accordingly, put the systems in place. Otherwise, what happens for most organizations is they run 40-50% turnover and they just kind of run through reps. But it's very costly. That's the issue. It's very costly, especially when you're looking at like when you have open territories and you start seeing like deals getting lost and you start seeing like, pipeline is not good. And then culture really breaks down. It becomes a whole issue as a result.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And hiring is hiring is challenging across the board. You could have somebody that is perfect. You get them in the seat and you're like, all the things that we just tested on aren't happening. Like what's going on? And a 20% turnover is still it's still quite low. Yep. For the most part. Like I think something like 46% is the average turnover.
Yeah.
Right. And so shifting into like the systems and processes, it sounds like you were locked in on that. When you got your number that was just so big and you looked at it and said, how am I going to do this? How did you roll this out with your managers so they had context and understanding and that they could then, motivate and drive the reps for attainment?
Great question. So the first piece is all about setting expectations, right? So reality is if you've been playing the game long enough, your number's always going to go up. And I knew that. So I knew every year it'd go up 10 to 20%. That was like pretty consistent across the board, right? But it was based off of trend, not the actual target. Okay. So that's how the organization ran. I knew that, right?
Right.
And I knew as a top 40 org. So all I had to do, because our fiscal year started in June. So all I would do, because I was part of the projection process, I'm managing the back end projections for my selling expense number, and we're forecasting our budget for the year, right? And we still don't know our number. So I just made sure I set the expectation it's going to be a big increase. So I would say, hey, team, we're looking at the numbers. I want to get everyone a heads up because we need to start doing the right things now. I project our number will go up probably about 20%, which means we'll probably be at this. So for example, if your team number is you're supposed to deliver 10 million bucks, let's make for simple math, it's probably going to go up like to 12 million, might be higher, it might be lower, but we need to mentally start wrapping our head around that. So I'm doing this like 4 to 5 months in advance. So this is very, very intentional, right? So what happens is I'm anchoring that number in their mind. This is basic psychology. So I'm anchoring them so that they understand it's like, okay, because people hate, so when they get it, they're like, yeah, it sucks, but I kind of expected it, right? Like it's like versus if they think it's gonna be like around the same number, if they think it's gonna be like maybe 10.5 mil and they get 12 mil, they're like, oh, they're like shocked, right? So that's really the first piece, right? The second piece is then breaking it down to individual rep productivity. So what does that mean? Each rep needs to deliver on a weekly or monthly basis. So we're breaking down to, because it's much more manageable, right? So for instance, like for simple math, kind of like, let's say if it's $1 million target, that might be scary for some people, like to hit $1 million target. Okay, well, what that means is we got to close, call it $22K a week. Okay, $22K a week. Okay, that's a little more feasible. For average deal size is $50K. Okay, it's got to close a couple of deals. But not only that, we work the math all the way through. So they break down how many appointments they need to book each week. So you run the math based off the ACV, the sales cycle, the average win rate or median win rate, and you can break it down to make it very, very simple. So you make it much more digestible, right? So these are like things you start to do, right? And then on top of that, we had something that's called Sustain Success, which is a very simple formula. I don't take credit for it. This is by the company. And it was a very simple formula, which is you take the number of meetings you run, new business meetings, you multiply your win rate or closing ratio, and you multiply your average deal size. That'll give you the average amount of revenue you're going to generate. And it can be over any time frame. So whether you want to measure on a weekly basis, a monthly, it'll work out to be the same number. And then you start to teach the reps how to increase not just the more meetings, but how can you increase your win rate? How can you increase your average deal size? Right? So you start to get really strategic, right? So you can start prescribing individually. I would teach the managers, how do you make sure you coach each rep accordingly? So for example, you have a brand new rep, you're trying to coach them to basically double their win rate and double their deal size. Very hard for them to believe. But can you get them to book 3 more meetings a week? A little bit easier to believe. Okay? So you leave them that way. Let's say you have a more senior rep, someone who's consistent presence club winner. They're scared of their new number they're going to have. No problem. They're not an activity beast. That's just not going to work for them anymore because they're far too skilled for that. But what can we work on? Hey, how can we do a better job increasing the ACV? Can we target better? Can we have a better targeted list? Can we get better at bundling? Can we leverage our other partners and other divisions and cross-sell and increase the deal sizes? Right? So we give them very tactical prescription plans that scales down. Right? So that's these other strategies. The other core strategy as well is we also had these basic enterprise reps that would sell, and they would also impact our overall region number as well. So like making sure the managers and the reps and myself were engaging with them, bringing them into deals. So that way they're helping the reps as well. So what happened is like when they would go, like an enterprise rep would go, and they had different names. I'm just calling enterprise to make it simple for most people. They would come, they're basically subject matter experts, if you will. That had a number. They get brought into these other larger opportunities. They can co-work the deal together. They both get credit for that number. And the benefit is for that local rep is they'll increase their skills too. So you may not have that benefit, but for me, what I looked at was like, what are my highest levers to drive results? And when I make it very, very simple, either get them to see more people, okay, get better at their win rates, or increase their deal sizes. I know that as overall strategies. Now, what are the tactics that I can do within each one to get them there? Right. And you make it easy for them, right? And then you must make it easy to deploy for your sales managers as well. So, for example, if your sales manager really struggles getting reps to like book more meetings, then you need to teach them how to get better at getting reps to book more meetings. Is it helping them build more segmented lists? Is it helping them with cold calling? Is it helping them get in the bullpen? What is the core constraint that's holding them back from getting that number? It's an easier number to pull. It's not the most reliable because obviously if they suck at closing and they have a low ACV, you're basically kind of, you have a leaky bucket still at the end of the day.
Yeah. I like how you're saying that because, there's one thing that I've been taught. I've been coaching a couple of sales leaders recently, and I asked them, I said, hey, what's the metric that you need to affect the most? And what's the skill that you believe will help impact that number? And so the one director looked at me, he's like, oh, can I think about it? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like if you had it right off the top of your head, I'd love it. But there is a question around skill set and then outcomes, right? It's inputs and outputs and all these other things. And so if you look at it like, my issue, Marcus, is that I haven't booked enough meetings. Okay. And it sounds like what you're really good at is like, all right, let's look at the data and figure out where are we not booking it. Is it because we have the wrong prospect list? Is it we are wrong targeting? That's what it sounds like to me. And again, this is the first time we've spoken, so I could be way off, but that's what it sounds like you were doing.
Oh, you get in the weeds. I'll give you an example, right? So I remember I was visiting a team. I don't want to say the team because in case they will listen to this later. And they were like complaining. They're like, my team is like, they're struggling to book meetings. You know, we have these what's called phone blocks. We'd have these phone blocks, you know, as a market, like they're just not booking, you know, because like, you know, they're just like, you know, they're just not good on the phone or the market's bad. But excuses basically. I said, okay, that sounds fair. How about this? Well, I'm gonna come into town and I'm gonna run your phone block with you. All right. Now, the expectation was in a phone block was 4 hours, which is you book 8 new business meetings. Okay. So these aren't follow-ups. These aren't second meetings. You never met them before. That was the expectation. So, and they were probably averaging like 3 to 4, right? Which might be great for some companies, but for us, like you can't be on my team. Let's be quite frank. You're not good enough, right? Until I scale you up. So, and their team was averaging that across the board. So I go down, you know, and it's 8 o'clock. That's when we start. Boom. And I'm like, hey team, like, listen, like I'm just here to observe. I don't want you, don't be worried. Like, am I here? Like, not grading you. My goal is just to help you guys. So I'm just going to listen. If I can help you, I'll guide you a little bit, right? And you know, so like I'm just gonna sit with each of you guys, right? And I go and I sit, and I sit with the first rep, you know, who they're a little bit nervous. They've been around for like 6 months or so, and they're I'm like, hey, you know, don't be nervous. Just do your thing, right? And I see her go. She picks the phone up and she like starts to call. You know, they don't answer. Leaves a voicemail. Hangs up. On the next call, pulls the next one. Calls. Dials. Person answers. Amazing, right?
Hey.
She's like thrown off. Like it's like, oh, just like starts like rambling, like whatever she said, and doesn't book the meeting. And I was like, okay. I'm like, all right. Well, I'm like, hey, good job. You know, she's all embarrassed. I'm like, well, you know, first off, that's awesome. She answered, right? So that's probably, you know, that's like half the battle. She's like, yeah, you know, like I just really didn't nail that objection, you know. And I was like, you know, I totally get that. I mean, maybe working on objection handling. But I was like, I noticed though, even with your opener and your script, I actually never even heard of it before. Like it was just like she's like spewing, just like trying to sell. I'm like, it's very much focused on the product and the service and the company. I'm like, it's actually completely different than what I've actually have trained you all on, actually, you know, in our rollouts. And she's like, yeah, I just don't think it works for me because of this. I'm not a script person, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm like, that's totally fine. In fact, even the script was actually pinned right in her cubicle. I said, well, you know, maybe you and I practice. What do you think? She's like, okay. I'm like, let's just try this. Just like, I'll pretend to be a prospect. Just read this verbatim out loud. So she reads it very robotically. I'm like, great. Nice job. Now let's try it again and just try to sound more natural. Does again. Sounds better. We go through 10 more times. Boom. Sounds much better. Okay. So about 10 times, it game tells us it sounds very natural. All right. I'm like, cool. Let's add some objection handling. Because I knew if she couldn't have that, she didn't learn the 5-step path I taught them.
Right.
Goes through, she botches it, no problem. 5 times, boom, nails it. I'm like, okay, how do you feel? She's like, I feel pretty good. Let's go. Call, no answer. Call, no answer. Call, answer. Runs through it. 3 objections, books the meeting. She almost falls out of her chair. I'm like, how'd that feel? She's like, oh my God, amazing. You know, we finished that hour. She books like 6 meetings an hour. And everyone's like, oh my, what just happened? They're like shocked. They're like, oh my God. And what's happening is the other peers hear it. So they're like changing this. I can hear them change the script, like pulling it out. They're like, oh shoot, Mark is going to coach me on this. And boom, they're getting better results. Not the same level because I was right next to her, right? But still, they were booking like 2, 3 the first hour. So they're posting up their numbers and they're fired up because like, and the salesman's like, oh my, what did you do? I'm like, I didn't do anything. I'm merely coaching them and helping them be successful, right? You know, and they had a misconception of it, right? So the data in their mind was the stuff doesn't work. So to reprogram the data, right? So that's why the lesson here is for sure get the data, but like if your team is not achieving whatever result, go see and find out what's going on.
Hmm.
Get in the trenches, see what's going on. Like we got done that session in 3 hours. They had all booked like 8 or more meetings. Each of them.
Wow.
They were like, this is a team like of like eight reps. They were like blown away. Like they were like walking on water after. Like I went in the field with one of the reps right after him. He was just like, "Oh my god, I've never seen that happen before." I'm like, but I told the guy, I'm like, "Cam, like, did I do anything special?" He's like, "Not really." I'm like, "What did you guys do?" He's like, "Well, we actually kind of stuck to what you taught us, and we just kind of practiced. We just kept going. We didn't stop." I'm like, "Exactly. Does that take skill or will?" He's like, "No, that's a will. It's not skill. It's a will thing." We go in the field. He's fired up, right? And like, we're going to walk into like a cold call, like an in-person cold call to a meeting. And I'm very fastidious about how we do it. I'm like, you bring all your stuff you need to close the deal. He's like, he walks in, one's walking empty-handed. I'm like, he's like, I'm like, where's your stuff? He's like, oh, I'm just going to walk in, get a business card and get out and stuff. I'm like, but what if they're ready to have a conversation? He's like, no, that never happens. I'm like, what if? Just let's find out. I mean, let's just be. I think it's a mental thing. Just walk in mentally. Like if you need to drop an agreement to close them on spot, what are you gonna do, right? So he brings all the stuff, and it's my lucky day. Like we walk in, owner's there. Owner's like, sure, let's have a seat. They're with the competitor. We sit down, and I'd help the rep a little bit, right? We one call close the deal for like 10K. Yearly, did not big deal, right? But like one call closed in 45 minutes. They're with the competitor, break them out, boom. And we're under contract walking out with a signed deal. He's like, oh my God, what happened? I'm like, this is a simple execution, right? This is what happens when you get in the field. As a leader, you just see the mental beliefs holding your team back. How can you reprogram them and coach them to a higher level of performance?
Yeah, there's a lot of that you just said in that is really resonating with me. One is, does your team, the individual contributors, have the belief in the system that they've been taught?
Correct.
And there's sometimes you have to go back and say, do you believe this? Like, are you following it, etc. Then the second thing, I could be very wrong. Did you have a manager or somebody that was leading that team, or did those individual contributors report directly to you?
No, they all had a manager.
So now it comes to the question of like, hey, manager, we walked through this, we taught this. Are you reinforcing?
Correct.
And so then I'm sure the manager felt uncomfortable because they're like, oh, yeah, I know you said that, but well, I just thought that you probably got excuses, right?
So you got
why
trust
you
and
didn't.
verify.
Yeah, and it's that trust and that's exactly it. It's trust and verify, right? Like, I'm going to make the assumption that you understand everything. We've gone through it. I've onboarded you. You're able to show it. Now I have to verify.
That's it.
And getting in the weeds, like leaders do have to get in the weeds.
That's it.
Is it going the way that I want? Is there something that I have, and the other thing too is there's so much to learn. I don't know how if you know Kevin Dorsey at all.
Oh yeah, KD. Yeah, we're tight.
Yeah, so KD. I remember taking a course through Pavilion with KD, and he talks about this, like he takes a week and he blocks everything out. Like, look, just leave me alone. I'm going to figure something out. If I ask you something, I'm going to need it quickly, but just leave me alone. And he'll go through and like, he'll run the process. Is the process going well? Did I maybe miss something? Hey, is something changed? How do I update it? And so I think he's very good at like explaining how he does that. And he talks about his frameworks very much like you do. But then, so taking that into the next step. So now that they've changed all the behaviors, your number's gone up. Is it all on you to deliver that number, or are you working with marketing to help you support that number and that pipeline requirement?
Great question. In my entire corporate background, I've had zero help from marketing.
What?
It's 100%. We were 100% outbound motion.
Wow.
So yeah. So they would have their own corporate marketing, but like, I mean, the campaigns weren't great. Very marketing ask. I mean, they started getting better kind of at the tail end. But like for the most part, like they were not like high value. People didn't really trust it. They saw it as more corporate marketing. That's all they saw it as.
So the experience you had was, I crushed my number. They didn't just give me the like, I'm going to grow from 100% to 120% next year. I landed at 200%. They're going to add me from 200% to 20% on top of the 200% is what my number is going to be.
Correct.
And I have zero support. Plus, I have to build the system, scale the system, deploy the system, and also make sure that the system's working.
100%.
There's a lot that's on your shoulders. What did the leadership above you say? Like, hey, Marcus, can you do everything that you're doing there across the company? And I think, and where this is coming from is Jocko, if you know Jocko Willink.
Oh, yeah, of course,
right? Like extreme ownership, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole notion of like he went into the Navy SEALs and then became the trainer for the Navy SEALs. It almost sounds like you could have taken that next evolution to that. But how did leadership look at what you're doing? Do they look at it as like you're entrepreneur, you're figuring it out, or you're breaking all the rules, but Marcus, you're crushing it, I'm going to leave you alone?
Depends on who to talk to be quite frank.
Okay.
So like my direct like VPs, they loved me because they're like, because they knew like whatever I was doing, they could just take, I'd happily teach everybody else and I'll happily help. In fact, I would actually like, I created masterminds in organizations with other directors in other regions to share with them what I'm doing, because I want to learn from them too. So it was like, I created a mastermind within the organization very intentionally, right? It was really, really powerful for me personally. Now, some leaders did not like this, by the way. So some that were very much like, you're like, this is, it's too much. You shouldn't be doing these type of things. They also know, I think they get scared, to be quite frank. So I became a threat because when you are that level entrepreneurial, you naturally, your next step is you go do it your own. Like it's like hopefully like that person does not wise up and just go do their own thing. Because ideally, your perfect world is you hire an intrapreneur, someone with an entrepreneur mindset inside a company that wants to stay there and they're good with that. That's what I always thought I was. But and I always told my boss, I said, listen, I will never quit you to go work for another company, but I will quit you my own thing. So your biggest risk is I suddenly believe in myself. I can go do that. That's your biggest risk. And that's what happened. Like I didn't go work for another company. I went to go do my own thing because I knew I could do it at scale. For sure. So even from a scaling perspective, I'm actually still in some of the training videos. So they actually flew me out and they record a bunch of content. I actually had hair back there. It's actually really funny. Like it's like I'm in the corporate. I get like text messages because like people still know me there, right? Yeah. So they'll text me, you're still in here. I'm like, all right, they haven't got rid of me yet, which is kind of funny. But it's cool. I think, but in reality is when you work for an organization, you do get to a point where you do outgrow a company over time. That can definitely happen. So it's like at that point you have to make a decision for yourself what you want to do.
Yeah, totally fair. Okay, I just realized we've been talking for 47 minutes and it's gone like that. So apologies, we're well over time than what I suggested. So if we can sort of move into wrapping up, I like to say this: everybody likes new, nobody likes different, and doing both at the same time can cause friction or uncertainty. So for companies or leaders listening to this and they're about to get a number increase, what are 2 or 3 operational or actionable things that you can say, hey, on Monday morning, when you get into the office, do these 2 or 3 things to prepare you to hit your number again next year?
Yep. Cool. So number 1, I'll look at your conversion numbers, conversion metrics, what's already going well, and how can you make it a little better? So if it's already doing well, for example, if you know your team has a pretty good overall win rate, how can you make it just a little bit better? Right. So that's the first step. You kind of think through, okay, cool. Because it's far easier to do that. And you have a far greater impact doing that. So if your team is really good at win rate, great. What else can we do to increase that? It's the first step. The second piece is I would take a look at your leadership team and your reps. Who are your locker room leaders that you're going to lean on to do more? Because certain reps can do more revenue. Certain managers can do more revenue. So being able to lean on them and you can bring them in and say, hey, listen, I really value your opinion. We're going to have a big increase over the year. Set a high anchor. What are some ideas or strategies we can leverage together as a team to make it better, right? You don't have to have all the answers, but if you can have the right people in the right room together, it's amazing what will come about as a result of that.
Very cool. I think I could have asked you 1,000 more questions from this, and it just felt like it was talking to a friend. So let's get wrapped up. That'll wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers. Marcus, Thank you so much for sharing these incredibly valuable insights. And as you heard, there's strategy you can put into action tomorrow. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Until next time, this is Carl with the Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn obstacles into opportunities. Thanks for investing your time with us today.